Good afternoon. I think we're broadcasting. We'll see how that plays out. But so far, everything looks good on that end. If you want to hit any chat up, certainly feel free to do that. Or any questions, certainly feel free to drop in there. I'm Jake Williams, or Malware Jake from Rendition Infosec. Thanks everybody for joining us, whether you're looking live or on the recording. That inevitably will come. Apologize for adjusting the camera there. I know that gives some people motion sickness. But Brandon McCrillis is with me. He's the CEO of Rendition Infosec. He does all of my day-to-day operations, manages all that, thank goodness, because God knows I can't with all the hopping around the country and the world there. I wanted to get together and talk about SB315, and this is something that's come up. I'm embarrassed to be, honestly, to be part of the great state of Georgia at the moment, given this ridiculous cybersecurity legislation. We were actually chatting about this over lunch and kind of decided initially we were just going to do a quick reporting and then one client call after another. We're like, we should pop this out as a webcast. That way we can do live questions if anybody's interested. But for those who aren't aware, SB315 is a new piece of legislation that came out of the Georgia legislature. It's actually due to be signed by or on Governor Nathan Deal's desk to be signed or vetoed, either one. And his last day to sign or veto it is May 8th. Right, so coming up quick. Right, yeah, time's ticking. He's actually signing some other legislation today, doing travel in kind of the state, doing the dog and pony stuff. Although it's not scheduled for him to sign it today. Who knows? He could actually take pen to paper anytime he wants. We want to just quickly talk about some of this because if you're in cybersecurity, this probably matters to you. If you're in the state of Georgia, it matters to you. And if you're thinking, I'm not in the state of Georgia, so it doesn't matter to me. Oh, buddy, think again. It turns out the provisions on this are really, really broad. And I think broad enough that it's likely to cause a couple of problems, right? We were chatting about specifically the cherry picking of cases. I think everybody who's done any work at all with the CFAA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, knows how flawed that is. Believe it or not, the language in SB 315 is actually worse than the language in the CFAA. And so what we expect to see happen then is a cherry picking by the feds of whether a particular case is going to be federal or if they want a lower burden of proof to come argue it in state court and keep it out of the federal system. So we're interested to see how that plays out because bear in mind, you're liable if you're in the state of Georgia where you're doing the hacking, and we'll talk about what constitutes hacking in a few minutes. But you're also liable if you are hacking a system in Georgia or if your traffic transits the great state of Georgia, right? So as you all know, it's very easy for you to do source routing where you can definitely avoid the, never mind. And there's actually a large fiber hub in Atlanta. So as we start talking about some of these problems, whether or not you live in Georgia or do business in Georgia, this bill could still come back to haunt you there. Do you have any thoughts you want to kick in on, Brandon, here? Or?
It's the ambiguous language that is the biggest thing here is what is constituting this event, and then we've had kicking around of, well, maybe we should just maybe the bill should be geared more towards intent, right? And then that kind of creates another problem with proving intent, and we all know how that goes. So I think definitely that folks that are operating in the jurisdiction of Georgia, they're going to be easy to target. They're going to be easy to prosecute under this kind of stuff. I can't see an actor out of Eastern Europe getting prosecuted or
clearly not,
or some sort of litigation over this. So.
Yeah. So in the debate, they actually talk a lot about the fact that Georgia needs to be anti-hacking and not necessarily, basically we're anti-hacking, we're not anti-business. Great, that's ideal, and maybe it's actually worth talking a little bit about. We got onto this discussion at lunch because we were talking about the SB315 attackers. We'll roll back around to that in just a minute, but I think it's helpful to know the context under which the bill was written. If you live in Georgia, you may be aware, and in fact, even if you don't, you may be aware that 2 years ago we had a large store of basically a voter records that were downloaded from a publicly accessible server using what effectively is URL hacking. right? So by basically modifying the contents of a URL link, they said, hey, I wonder, here's a number dot whatever, right? And so they said, oh, what if I change that 101 to 102 or 103 or whatever? And as a result, downloaded a ton of information about a lot of Georgia voters. And the number escapes me, and honestly, it doesn't really matter. Really what came back around on this is that the Georgia legislature said, hey, how can this not be illegal? And they said, we're going to make it illegal, right? It's not illegal under the CFAA, probably, right? As a matter of law, that hasn't really been tested about. We know Weave, Andrew Orenheimer, who's certainly not going to defend Weave's personal views here, but he went to prison for URL hacking, and then procedurally won an appeal. And so it was never tested necessarily as a matter of law as to whether or not URL hacking, because the government declined to bring the case again. So as far as, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but as far as I'm aware, we've never defined that specifically as illegal. In any case, the feds opted not to take the case. And now we have SB315 as a result, because Georgia state legislators said, hey, how can this not be a crime, right? So you want to kick over maybe to the, you've been following the SB315 attackers a little better.
Well, what was it? The Kennesaw State University. Is that where they downloaded the voter records from? 2 years
I believe
ago?
it was. That sounds right. I
Right.
believe it was university.
And it was accessing it, but not transmitting it somewhere else or storing it.
Right.
That's where they got it from. Yeah. So, butthurt politics. Butthurt. Is it okay to use butthurt on live TV? Maybe.
I guess so. I mean, it's the chicken's out of the coop at this point, my friend.
You get butthurt. You can't prosecute this guy that was reporting, access to this information that honestly shouldn't have been able to access.
Sure.
To the folks that can get it fixed. And you want to slap some cuffs on them. Anyway, I can rant about that. Regarding the SB315 hacking group.
Yeah, totally.
We've had a little news here about Georgia Southern University.
Yep.
And then a local Augusta business that does some low key type website design. We were talking earlier.
Yep.
Likely maybe a brute force into a CMS system, making enacting changes across multiple client websites at the same time. But either way, I think. Definitely two sides of the fence here, right? Does this SB315 hacking group really promote awareness of SB315? I would say yes, more awareness is there.
Definitely promoting awareness, no question.
Tactics behind it, it's. I think it's a good attempt to increase awareness. I think it was a bad execution because it just makes us look bad, right? And as security professionals,
us as security,
right.
Not us,
right.
but us as security professionals.
Us as security professionals, it just makes us look bad.
Yeah. No, I kind of agree with that, and I might kind of point out here that I think that's probably counter. Their execution is actually hurting their goals. If the goal was to raise awareness, they've done it, right? But their goal is clearly more, right? One thing that you left out in the note there is that they are threatening additional cyber attacks against. Basically, these were the proof of concepts. They say that they've got passwords and access to Augusta government, assets. I believe somebody mentioned there's some mention of Atlanta potentially as well. And so as you kind of step back here, and they're promising more cyber attacks in the state of Georgia if this is signed, while I understand their motive and I'm not happy about the legislation, obviously we can't for a minute A, condone this, and B, I don't know that we can really say that this is likely to achieve their goal, right? When we look at the onus for the legislation, to use Brandon's term there, basically butthurt legislators, who honestly, again, if you watch some of the public debate on the floor, it is clear that the people sponsoring this bill do not understand cybersecurity, right? Some of the same issues that we've had traditionally with the CFAA, basically broad definitions of the term unauthorized access, continue to be a problem here in SB 315. And basically, as we look at this, it's clear they don't understand it. And they're doing knee-jerk reaction to, oh my gosh, hackers, right? By us putting more hackers out there in the name of SB 315, I think we're actually hurting our message, right? So I'll go ahead and call on the folks that are behind SB 315 hacking group, call on them very publicly and say, guys, please stop, man. You're not helping us. I mean, we want to fight against SB 315. We're down with that, right? We've come out publicly speaking against it. We're on the record there, on the record again here. But really, you're hurting our message here, right? So as frequently happens with hacktivist campaigns, right? Again, people see the hacking, they miss the message, right? So any other thoughts?
Ran into a state of Georgia, had a booth at RSA. I was out there. Was it last week?
Last week.
I'm still on RSA recovery. I think RSA recovery is over now. I can't claim that anymore. But anyway, had a great had a great conversation with the Georgia State CIO about articles we were mentioned in. Those you don't know, Atlanta had a ransomware attack. I'm pretty sure everyone knows about that by now. Rendition Infosec. Jake has been in the news a bunch of times with commentary there. But the takeaway is, Atlanta said it was an isolated incident. Rendition
clearly was
has data from over a year ago when we were doing our scans for our own clients to give them a heads up and say, hey, you're owned by this shadow brokers release, MS 1710 type stuff, and we have data showing that these Atlanta servers had a backdoor installed on them a year before this ransomware attack.
Five Atlanta servers, right?
Right. Under SB13, can we do that, Jake?
Absolutely not. No. So that's, and this is a great point, right? Because under SB315, it would be illegal for us to have facilitated the scanning from the great state of Georgia, and we absolutely did that. It would have also been illegal for us to scan the servers in Georgia, and this is a realistic problem here. And if you think for a minute that well, that's okay, let the port scans go by the wayside. I kind of disagree with this. Now I want to be very clear that we don't just vulnerability scan the internet. This was a specific vulnerability, a specific piece of malware that we're scanning for named Double Pulsar, and we scanned the entire internet repeatedly, actually, during April and early May of last year. So before the WannaCry, once we saw numbers start dropping off pretty significantly, that's when we went ahead and discontinued our scans. Thankfully, about a week and change before WannaCry hit. That said. This is actually proven to be, and again, our customers got a lot out of this, but separate from that, it's been a really interesting piece of data in the Atlanta ransomware attack, because if you listen to the Atlanta government officials, they, a lot of woe is me going on, a lot of this could happen to anybody. And in point of fact, we're not ambulance chasers, so I'll be fair and tell you that I didn't, we didn't notify the city of Atlanta, right? At one point, our highest scan numbers came out to us 150,000, something like that, infected hosts. Way too many, right? Even on the low side, pushing, in the 40 to 50,000 as we saw it start to drop off. There was no way we could notify everybody. But when the Atlanta ransomware thing kicked off, a few days later, we were sitting here in the office actually chatting, and he's, Brandon actually brought up the great point. He's like, do we have any data on them? We went back and started looking, and the answer is, yeah, we do, right? So 5 servers, right? Now, you put this in the context of the city of Atlanta. Again, we're looking at 5 servers that we know were compromised, and not a question of whether they're vulnerable. They were actively infected. 5 servers, including one of them that was a mail server, actively infected in basically back in April 2017. Right, so late April 2017, and they didn't disclose that. And by law, they would have had to. There's no way that your mail server doesn't contain PII. You can't convince me otherwise. You just can't. And so by law, by Georgia law, we would have had to disclose. They would have had to disclose that. They clearly didn't. Look, this is now become, this piece of data, this data set, and I use this as an example because I think it's a great example of something that is providing necessary context around, around a debate on how the city of Atlanta manages cybersecurity. There are other municipalities learning from this. We know that because we've gotten a call from a few of them, and municipalities learning from this. And in the current, climate with SB315, that data would not be accessible to us, right? We could not have created that data set. Again, I think it's a valuable data set. I think that it does a lot for us. It does a lot for the discussion, and is the single thing. By the way, I've been told by several people in the press, it's the single thing that they're able to go back on when any of the Atlanta government officials come back and say, no, we're secure. Right, this was a one-time event. They're able to hit that and say, no, it's not a one-time event. It's not a one-time event. That's the one thing that they're pointing to back there. And I think if you're a cybersecurity professional, you're tracking with what a big deal that is, to be able to say not a one-time event, right? So we're looking at, basically SB315 would shut off that transparency, among a lot of other things that I can think of right off the bat. But that to me is probably one of the big ones. I think it's also probably worth mentioning that Google, Microsoft have also sent a combined letter together to Nathan Deal, Governor Deal, to basically urge him not to sign the bill because it actually has a broad authorization for hacking back, right? So, again, that then creates a whole separate issue. It says, well, basically, and I say authorization, right? Obviously, state law doesn't allow you to go violate federal law, but but it does lend itself there. The interpretation is that you have authorization to strike back as long as it's an active cybersecurity measure. Effectively, is what it says. So kind of garbage. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
by the way, or
same thing, right? I mean, this is very loose language in what you can do that we're looking at from a cybersecurity company. What can we do? But also look at the attacker, right? There's an obvious loophole here. We're saying, okay, it's okay to test for active cybersecurity defense measures. Think about people in the kind of gray hat space that could then say, oh well, you get caught under this. You can say, well, this was active cyber defense testing. A couple of things I have to say. Sorry, Atlanta, that we have data and that you can't. We've made it so you can't say that you weren't owned ahead of this last ransomware. Sorry about that. We'd glad to help you out. For anyone listening that's like, hey, I wonder if I'm on that list too, we still have the data set.
Yeah, totally.
And you can go on our website and request us to search through there and we'll tell you.
Yeah, so. Now look, for obvious reasons too, our lawyers have said no on publishing the full data set, right? So again, when we say we'll search through there for your domain specifically, or your IP range specifically. Once we're, again, I'm not looking to get sued any more than Atlanta's probably going to. So the law specifically mentions active defense measures, and I'm quoting here, active defense measures that are designed to prevent or detect unauthorized computer access. Unfortunately, that is ridiculously broad, right? Because again, it specifically exempts any active defense measures, right? So again, from a hacking back standpoint, imagine what that opens up from a defense angle. And I love that point there, right? How do you, particularly when you have folks that are themselves, white hat by day, black hat-ish by night, right? How do you deal with something like that, right? And how does that play in? How does that play in here, right? So Google, Microsoft have recognized that, and they've actually addressed that. And then of course, one of the things early on that they were having issues with really comes down to terms of service. Luckily, that was stricken out of the bill. Basically, what it was going to provide was, and this is how flawed this legislation was, that actually only got taken out by amendment, right? That basically the commercial terms of service were going to dictate you violating terms of service was breaking Georgia law, right? Which is insanity, right? I mean, beyond insanity. So anyway, the accessing a computer network for legitimate business activity is what's allowed, and everything else explicitly is disallowed. The problem is, how do you define legitimate business activity? I think we all know that's pretty weak, and again, particularly when you get into cybersecurity, that there's so much space there between hacking, like full-on black hat hacking, and legitimate business activity. It's really hard to get down to ground truth. You have any other thoughts?
SB315. I mean, we see the point. We see the motivation behind it. We understand the feels that the state of Georgia has from this Kennesaw voter data leakage. SB315. It isn't the way to do it. This isn't the vehicle. The language is bad. Please, I know we would love to help write that. I know it's I don't know how qualified we are here, other than cybersecurity experts. But hey, source help from your state, Georgia, and then other states. I think we're under. It's only 3 states left that don't have legislation like this. Yeah. The
majority of them are bad, though, right? The majority of them also have bad language. This one goes above and beyond, though, unfortunately, in the bad language, right? The majority of them, no other state, as far as we're aware, has the hacking back exemption, and basically none of them had help on that, have the hacking back piece in there. So. I guess, and I got a question in here. I won't read the name unless anybody wants that there, but it says the politicians didn't write it on their own. They must have had some expert help. Any insight into who helped them work on this? To be honest, I don't have a lot of good insight there. I'll say that it looks very copy and paste-ish, almost like a DIY build, to be honest with you. I can tell you that there is, if tech experts were involved, having actually read the legislation, right? If tech experts were involved, they weren't listened to, right? So just bringing somebody in doesn't, and look, if you work in cybersecurity, you're probably familiar with this as well. Bringing somebody in and as an expert to help you with their cybersecurity needs and listening to them are 2 different things entirely, right? And I think that's what happened here as well. If they brought anybody in, and look, honestly, it could totally be a copy paste job. In fact, one of those pieces that and we've got a blog post coming up here as soon as this archives and we can upload it to YouTube and all that. We'll push the blog post here, but one of the things that we note is that one of the senators who introduces the bill actually stands up and says there should be no question about what unauthorized access means. It's obvious to everybody, and it's clearly not obvious to everybody. That's one of the fundamental problems of the CFAA, right? So coming back to the question in chat here, I really think that again it looks largely copy paste, and he even admits, the senator who introduced it, forgive me, the name escapes me at the moment, we'll have the video link there as well. He admits, he's like, I'm not the tech guy, right? He's like, I'm not a lawyer, right? And he's like, but we all know what unauthorized access means. And a couple other senators question him on and say, listen, specifically, this is being argued in the courts as we speak, in different state courts as well as federal court surrounding the CFAA, about what does unauthorized access mean. So for us to travel down that road today and pass a bill with the same flawed provisions in it isn't doing Georgians or honestly anybody any favors. And I might actually add too, has Amazon decided where they're putting the new headquarters, the headquarters to? Have they officially decided yet? I know Atlanta's on the short list.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet.
I can't imagine Atlanta stays on the short list if this passes. I mean, if it does, I'm telling you, if this passes, depending on how it's prosecuted, we may move Rendition. No joke, may move Rendition. I can't imagine
somewhere nice.
Somewhere nice, yeah, totally, of course, right? But no joke, and I say that not lightly at all, right? I mean, if this hampers how we do business and they're actually prosecuting under the law, I can't see how we can actively stay. I don't want to open myself up to that liability. I can totally see us moving across state lines. Luckily, we're sitting in Augusta. South Carolina is not far away. South Carolina, we're looking at you, right? Anyway, no joke though. Seriously, I can't imagine Amazon brings their facility to a state with seriously flawed legislation where they don't know how that's going to be interpreted yet. It's not tech friendly for the state. It's not tax friendly for the state. Nothing about this is good. And again, even if you don't live in the state or work in the state, that this can end up impacting, and will potentially end up impacting you depending on how it's selectively prosecuted. Any other thoughts?
No.
Okay. Yeah. I'm tapped. I think I'm tapped out too. We're 20 some odd minutes here. Any other questions from chat before we break this off? Yeah, I got nothing in chat here. Okay. Hey, look, for the folks that are out there that came out live, really appreciate it. For everybody else watching the video, appreciate that too. Have a good one, and we'll see you later. Enjoy.